tried and trusted modus operandi, from his days in the jungles of Borneo to the present-day jungles of Whitehall, was to storm through the world, sucking the air from everyone in his way. He was the embodiment of preemptive attack, one colleague had observed. Others offered their amateur psychological diagnosis that Adrian behaved as if the planet had done him some grievous disservice. His physical deportment and mental attitude was one of pugnacious defensiveness. Under the good life flab that now showed signs of mushrooming around his waist, his wired-up muscles were ready to spring, his fists regularly clenched, and the dark eyes in his livid red face rarely rested. Adrian was never as meticulous about anything as he was in matters of revenge, and that was the purpose of his trip this evening. It was revenge against a broken home that had driven him to excel in the military, some said, and revenge against his small stature that drove him to graduate from SAS headquarters at Hereford in the 1960s, ahead of all his contemporaries. Others pointed to a sort of muddled revenge against the establishment, while all the time wanting to be deep inside it. This, they said, was what had propelled him upwards in MI6, now almost to the top. But it was a particular revenge that had brought him out of his lair today. It had taken Adrian 14 months just to get to this point. But at last, here he was, at first base. He was now in possession of an identity. The identity of an assassin, with a name, address, phone number, and probably an inside-length measurement, given the heightened efforts of the office researchers on this particular assignment. For this assassin, a Russian hood by the name of Grigory Bykov, had terminated the life of one of the Secret Intelligence Service's own officers, and one of a select few Adrian liked to call his best boys. Diligent researchers on the third floor had gladly embraced overtime without pay. Finn had been family, popular too, even loved. Interdepartmental cooperation had been unusually fluid, and the focused urgency of revenge for Finn's murder had driven everyone on, Adrian included, until the task was done. Drip-fed leads from sources as diverse as a disaffected KGB officer in Azerbaijan to the owner of a steam bath and brothel in the Siberian city of Irkutsk had led conclusively to Grigory Bykov. Finally, the researchers had drawn up Bykov's biography with meticulous care. In short, Bykov was a petty criminal and South Moscow mafioso, coached to KGB standards and then inducted into the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service east of Moscow, known as the Forest. There they had primed him for this single murder. After all this expert training, Grigory Bykov had finally tracked down Finn in Paris, then killed him with a deadly nerve agent, type unknown, that he'd smeared on the steering wheel of Finn's rental car. That was the Russian side of things. The British side was more complex. Finn had once been one of Adrian's best boys. That was the truth of it. Adrian had recruited Finn personally at Cambridge back in 1985, back in Gorbachev's time. And no matter that Finn had turned his back on the Secret Intelligence Service in later years, Finn was still Adrian's property, in death as well as in life. Nobody, Vladimir Putin included, was going to get away with ordering the death of one of Adrian's best boys. In his grey silk suit and expensive Oxford blue cashmere overcoat, both of which were courtesy of his wife Penny's private fortune rather than his SIS pay, Adrian might look like a toothless catwalk panther, but underneath it all the animal core was still the same one that had driven him through Far Eastern jungles 40 years before, where he'd shot or cut the throats of commie insurgents and saved the world from Putin's KGB predecessors. Adrian began to stoke his own righteous anger now, in preparation for the meeting with Sergei Limov, Putin's go-between for this evening. More than 3 days it had taken Finn to die, thanks to Bykov, in the trunk of a car, somewhere in Germany, it was said, though Finn's body had been delivered anonymously to the British Embassy in Berlin. There'd been a note attached to Finn's body, laid out respectfully on the back seat of a Cherokee Jeep, which was abandoned outside the embassy. The note was addressed to Adrian personally. "You betrayed him in life," it said. "Honor him in death." Who would deliver a body, let alone one as hot as that one? And who was it, with Finn's corpse on their hands, who dared express such anger and such accuracy at the steps of the British Embassy? The note pointed him towards two people. Adrian's mind turned once again.